Tonight, we are not here to study dates or memorize battles. We are here to listen, to let the quiet echo of the ancient world guide us toward rest. We will travel back to a time when gods walked among mortals, when destinies were forged in fire, and when love could turn a god to stone. There is nothing for you to do now but breathe. Let the noise of your day soften and fade. Allow the stories to gently unfold, like a worn scroll unrolling in the quiet of a library. Our first story is one of spark and shadow, of a boy born of the forge, who was destined to either save humanity, or be consumed by the very fire he sought to command. Let us begin the Tale of Aryan, the Fire-Bearer. Part 1. The Tale of Aryan, the Fire-Bearer. In the age before history was written, in the bustling city of Mycenae, there was a forge that burned brighter than any other. Its fires did not merely heat metal, they seemed to hold a piece of the sun itself, a stubborn warmth against the growing cold of the world. This was the domain of a woman named Callista. She was not a queen, nor a priestess. Callista was a blacksmith, a mortal whose skill was a quiet challenge to the gods. Her hands, though calloused and stained with soot, moved with a divine grace. From her anvil came swords that could cleave a falling leaf in two, and armor so perfectly joined it was said to be like a second skin, woven from moonlight and iron. The gods on high Olympus saw her work. They saw the perfection, the dedication, and they were, for the most part, indifferent. Mortals were fleeting, their creations destined for dust. But one god was not indifferent. Hephaestus, the lame god of the forge, the divine craftsman cast out from the gleaming halls of his peers, saw in Callista not a subject, but an equal. He did not see a mortal woman. He saw a fellow artist, a soul who understood the language of fire and steel as he did. He watched her from the shadows of Olympus, not with the lust of Zeus or the vanity of Apollo, but with a quiet, profound respect. He saw how she listened to the iron before she struck, how she coaxed the fire rather than commanding it. He saw the loneliness in her craft, a mirror of his own. One night, when the moon hung like a bronze shield in the sky, a stranger appeared at the door of her forge. He was wrapped in shadows, his form indistinct in the billowing steam, but the fire in the hearth leaped in recognition, its flames turning a brilliant, impossible white. The stranger was Hephaestus. He offered no godly pronouncements, no gifts of gold or power. He simply entered, picked up a hammer, and began to work alongside her. All through the night, the two hammers rang in perfect harmony, a song of creation that echoed through the sleeping city. It was a language beyond words, an understanding forged in heat and silence. 9 months later, a child was born. They named him Aryan. He did not enter the world with a cry, but with a quiet, knowing stillness. As he took his first breath, the flames in the forge surged, casting dancing shadows on the walls. His eyes, when they opened, were not the soft blue of an infant, but the deep, glowing orange of embers. The midwives drew back, their whispers filling the room like rustling leaves. One said he was blessed, another that he was cursed. But Callista simply held him close, feeling the impossible warmth emanating from his small body. And she knew he was both. Aryan's childhood was not one of games and laughter. It was one of observation, of learning. He grew with an unnatural speed. At the age of 5, when other children were molding clay, he was shaping soft iron with his bare hands. At 7, he forged his first dagger, a blade so perfectly balanced and sharp it hummed when the wind touched it. The other children of Mycenae felt the strangeness in him. There was a gravity to Aryan, a silence that made their playful shouts feel foolish. They did not bully him, they simply avoided him, like a quiet pool of water that might be deeper than it looks. The village priest saw the glow in his eyes and refused to bless him, fearing that the fire within him was not of this world. But Callista loved him with a fierce and gentle strength. She taught him the blacksmith's art not as a trade, but as a philosophy. "Fire is not a tool," she would say, her voice soft against the roar of the forge. "It is a conversation. It will obey you only if you listen to what it needs." Aryan listened. He learned to feel the needs of the metal, to understand the language of the flame. His forge became his sanctuary, the only place where the fire inside him felt at home. And so he grew into a young man, a master craftsman whose name was whispered in cities far beyond Mycenae. But as he worked, shaping steel for kings he would never meet, a coldness began to creep into the world. It was a subtle chill at first, a frost that lingered too long in the mornings, a fire that needed a little more coaxing to burn bright. The eternal flame, the source of all fire on earth, was a gift. A treasure stolen from the gods by the titan Prometheus, who believed humanity deserved to have light in the darkness. It was the fire of innovation, of art, of thought. It was the spark that separated humankind from the beasts of the field. But the gods had punished Prometheus for his love of mortals, and over the centuries, they had come to resent his gift. They watched from their golden halls as humanity grew proud, forgetting the divine source of their warmth. And so, in their silent anger, they began to withdraw their blessing. The eternal flame, housed in a great brazier on the peak of Mount Olympus, began to dim. Across the lands of Greece, the effect was slow but undeniable. Hearths that had burned for generations now flickered and died, refusing to be relit. The great forests grew damp and cold. Crops failed to ripen in the fields, and a deep, soul-biting chill settled into the stone of the cities. It was not the dramatic end of the world, but a slow, quiet fading. A world losing its warmth. The priests declared it a punishment for hubris. The scholars blamed a shift in the stars. But ordinary people felt a simpler, more terrifying truth in their bones. The gods had forgotten them. On Olympus, the gods told themselves it was justice. But in truth, it was fear. They had sealed away the last true spark of the eternal flame, guarding it jealously, terrified that another Prometheus might arise, that humanity might once again challenge the heavens with a gift they had not earned. But the world has its own magic, its own ways of seeking balance. Whispers began to travel on the wind, stories carried by the spirits of nature who were not bound by the laws of Olympus. Dryads in the cold forests spoke of a boy in Mycenae whose hands could coax warmth from dead coals. Nymphs in the freezing streams saw a flicker of divine fire in a young blacksmith's eyes. The name Aryan was carried from the mountains to the sea. In the hallowed, freezing halls of Delphi, the oracle, the last conduit to the divine, began to dream. She saw a figure made of fire walking the earth, his footsteps leaving trails of warmth, reigniting the forgotten hearths of the world. Aryan knew nothing of this. He only knew that the iron in his forge was growing stubborn and cold. He felt the fire inside him, once a steady furnace, now a struggling ember. The world was dimming, and for the first time, he felt a coldness that his own inner flame could not vanquish. He did not yet know his purpose, but destiny was stirring. The fading world had begun to look for a hero. And on the peak of Mount Olympus, the guarded flame flickered, not for a god, but in answer to the boy forged of fire and steel. The journey began with a premonition. A coldness so profound it settled not in Aryan's bones, but in his soul. He knew, with a certainty he could not explain, that the answer lay at the center of the world, at the sanctuary of Delphi. He arrived to a place of decay and silence. The great temple, once gleaming white, was now gray and scarred with moss. The sacred fires that should have lined the path were nothing but cold, blackened pits. He descended into the heart of the temple, into the Adyton, the chamber where the oracle spoke. There, on a throne of crumbling stone, sat the Pythia. Her eyes were blind, but they seemed to see everything, swirling with the phantom light of distant storms. Before he could utter a word, she spoke, her voice a dry whisper, like snakeskin over old parchment. Aryan. The name echoed in the vast, empty chamber. He did not ask how she knew it. "You will climb the mountain," she hissed, her voice gaining a strange, crackling strength. "You will seek the flame. And you will die." It was not a riddle. It was not a warning. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the weary finality of one who has seen the end of every story. Aryan, who had known only the straightforward honesty of the forge, felt no fear, only a sense of clarity. "Why?" he asked, his voice calm and steady. The oracle rose, her violet robes swirling around her like smoke. "The flame was never meant for mortals. It was stolen once, and the price was an eternity of torment. The gods will not allow it to be stolen again." She drifted closer, the air growing cold around her. "They will oppose you. Fate itself will conspire against you. What you seek is not a gift to be taken, but a curse to be borne." Aryan clenched his fists, the fire within him flaring in defiance. "Then I will bear it." A sound like cracking stone filled the chamber. It was the oracle, laughing. a dry, humorless sound. "You already are, child of the forge," she whispered. "You have been bearing it since the day you were born." The chamber plunged into darkness. A great wind swept through the temple, and when the light returned, the oracle was slumped on her throne, silent, a vessel once more empty. Her prophecy was delivered. Aryan left Delphi with the oracle's words echoing in his heart. He was to die. But the vision she had placed in his mind was not of his death, but of a world restored to warmth. And for him, that was enough. To ascend Mount Olympus, one must first descend. Legend said the roots of the holy mountain were entwined with the very fabric of the underworld, and that a gate, unseen by mortal eyes, blocked the path. This gate was guarded by Cerberus, the three-headed hound of Hades, a beast of profound and ancient terror. Aryan did not intend to fight the beast. A warrior fights with steel, but a craftsman wins with understanding. For 3 days and 3 nights, he labored in a small, borrowed forge at the foot of the mountains. He was not crafting a weapon, but a gift. He forged a collar, not of bronze or iron, but of obsidian, cooled in the water of a sacred spring, and inlaid with silver that shimmered like captured starlight. On each of the 3 segments of the collar, he carved a single, powerful word: memory, loyalty, grief. On the 4th day, he found the entrance, a dark maw in the earth that breathed a cold, soulless air. He descended into the blackness, walking past glowing fungi and the silent, watchful bones of those who had tried and failed before him. Deeper he went, until the air grew thick with a palpable sense of sorrow, and he heard it, a low, rumbling breath, threefold, like a storm dreaming of itself. He stepped into a vast cavern, and there it was. Cerberus slept on a bed of ash, larger than any beast of the mortal world. Its fur was the color of absolute nothingness. One head twitched and whimpered in a dream of loss, another growled softly at some phantom intruder, and the third lay utterly still, as if in mourning. Aryan did not draw a weapon. He knelt, holding the collar before him, and began to hum. It was a simple melody, a lullaby his mother, Callista, had sung to him when he was a child, a song of safety and warmth against the fears of the night. The middle head of Cerberus stirred, its ears perking. The left head opened a single eye, a glowing orb of amber. The right head's growl subsided. All 3 heads turned toward him, not with aggression, but with a deep, ancient curiosity. The beast did not hear a threat. It heard a song of love and loss, a language it understood better than any command. Slowly, respectfully, Aryan approached. He reached out and gently fastened the collar. The beast exhaled, a long, deep sigh that seemed to carry the grief of ages. Then, with a quiet reverence, it stepped aside. The path to Olympus was now open. Aryan had not conquered Death's guardian. He had honored it. The ascent was a trial not of strength, but of will. The slopes of Olympus were not mere rock and ice. They were a manifestation of divine will, and they resisted his every step. The air grew thin, and the wind whispered his deepest doubts into his ear. And then, he was no longer alone. Leaning against a rock, dressed as a simple traveler, was Hermes. The messenger god, the trickster, his eyes held an ancient, knowing amusement. "Quite the climb for a mortal," he said, his voice smooth as polished stone. Aryan did not stop. "I am not merely immortal," Hermes chuckled, appearing beside him without taking a single step. "Ah yes, the spark of my grumpy uncle, Hephaestus. It makes you stubborn. I am not here to stop you, you know. I am merely a messenger. And my message is this: turn back." "No," Aryan said simply. The smile on Hermes's face tightened. "You seek to correct a balance that the gods themselves broke. They took the fire back for a reason. Humanity grew arrogant. They used the gift of thought to dream of thrones, not of art. The cold is a lesson. The lesson is killing them," Aryan replied, his voice firm. Hermes sighed, a theatrical sound of feigned disappointment. "You are trying to be a hero, little spark. You are trying to repeat the story of Prometheus. But that story has already been written, and it does not end well." "I am not Prometheus," Aryan said, pausing to look the god in the eye. "I am a blacksmith. And when something is broken, I fix it. For the first time, the amusement in Hermes's eyes faded, replaced by something colder. Very well, he said, stepping forward. If you will not accept a message, accept a gift instead. He placed 2 fingers on Aryan's chest. It was not a blow. It was something far worse. A cold, sharp energy shot into Aryan's heart, a shard of divine ice. It did not hurt, but he felt it settle there, a foreign presence. The flame you seek is a power far greater than your father's spark, Hermes whispered, his voice now devoid of any warmth. When you take it, it will not be your tool. It will be your master. It will burn away everything that makes you human, everything you love, everything you are. It will burn until only the fire itself remains. And with that, Hermes vanished. The mountain groaned, and the sky above began to darken. The gods had sent their message. The true trial was about to begin. The curse felt like a seed of winter planted in his heart. The higher he climbed, the more it grew, its icy tendrils spreading through his veins. It was a chilling, draining cold that fought against the natural fire within him. He felt his memories of his mother's face begin to fade at the edges, the sound of her hammer growing distant. He was being hollowed out. Olympus was no longer a mountain, it was a living entity, a fortress of divine will. The rocks would shift to create impassable cliffs. Sudden, violent winds would try to tear him from his holds. He passed through ruins of forgotten temples, built by earlier, lesser gods, their altars now covered in ice. He saw statues of great titans, their faces erased by time and the fury of the Olympians who had overthrown them. It was a graveyard of forgotten power, and Aryan realized a profound truth. The gods were not truly omnipotent. They were merely the victors of an ancient war, and they were terrified of losing their power. They were not guarding the flame to protect humanity. They were hoarding it to protect themselves. This realization gave him strength. He was not just fighting for the warmth of his world, he was fighting against the cold fear of the gods. He climbed on, his mortal hands bleeding, his divine blood singing with a defiant heat. He rose above the clouds, into a realm of pure, thin air where the world below was just a memory. And there, on the flattened peak of the mountain, he saw it. The eternal flame. It burned in the center of a silent, circular clearing, housed in a brazier of a black, unknown stone. It was not a roaring inferno, but a single, serene, white flame, dancing with an intelligence of its own. It did not radiate heat, it radiated pure potential. It was the fire of creation itself. As Aryan approached, the icy curse in his chest recoiled. The flame on the pedestal seemed to recognize the spark within him, its ancient sibling. He felt a pull, a sense of homecoming that was both beautiful and terrifying. He reached out his hand. In that instant, his mind was flooded with visions. He saw the first man creating the first tool. He saw the first artist painting on a cave wall by firelight. He saw the great library of Alexandria, its scrolls containing the accumulated knowledge of the world, all written by the light of candles. And he saw the dark side, the fire of war, of burning cities, of funeral pyres. The flame was not good or evil. It was simply power. He could turn back. He could leave this terrible responsibility here. But then he saw a final vision, his mother, Callista, old and frail, her hands too stiff to hold a hammer, shivering beside a cold, empty forge. He would not let her world end in cold and darkness. With a silent roar, he plunged his hands into the white fire. The pain was absolute. It was not the pain of burning, but the pain of being unmade and remade. The flame did not sit in his hands, it poured into him, a river of pure energy, rewriting his very essence. His bones glowed like heated iron, his blood turned to liquid light. He was no longer a man holding a fire. He was the fire. The great brazier on the pedestal flickered one last time and went dark, its purpose served. The eternal flame was no longer a prisoner of Olympus. It had found a new vessel. Aryan collapsed to the ground, smoke rising from his skin, his eyes glowing with the soft, steady light of a newborn star. He had done it. He had taken the flame. And in doing so, he had sealed his own fate. The journey down the mountain was strangely peaceful. The winds were calm, the rocks seemed to offer him footholds. Olympus, having lost its prize, fell into a deep, sulking silence. Aryan walked not as a man, but as a living torch. The curse of Hermes was now coming true. The flame within him was a benevolent inferno, and it was slowly, gently, consuming him. His skin began to crack, not with wounds, but like cooling lava, revealing a soft, golden light beneath. His hair shimmered like spun sunlight. He did not feel pain, only a sense of profound, and sorrowful, transformation. He did not give the fire to humanity as a tool. He gave it as a gift of himself. He walked into the first frozen village, and held out his hand to a cold, ashen hearth. A soft flame flowed from his fingertips, and the hearth roared to life with a warmth no one had felt in a generation. He moved to the next, and the next. From village to village, city to city, he walked, leaving a trail of warmth and light behind him. People did not worship him. They did not even speak to him. They simply gathered by their newly lit fires, a quiet awe and gratitude in their eyes. They knew, without being told, that this gift was costing him everything. He grew translucent, his form becoming less solid, more a being of pure light and heat. He was a walking sunset, beautiful and fleeting. He had stolen the fire not with pride, but with love. He had not come to challenge the gods, but to remind them of the world they had chosen to forget. No one knows where Aryan's journey ended. There is no tomb, no monument. Some say he walked until he was nothing more than a final, warm breeze that swept across the land, lighting the last cold hearth before disappearing forever. Others say he returned to his mother's forge, and in one final act, merged with the fire in its heart, where he burns silently to this day. But even now, it is said that when a fire in a hearth suddenly leaps and burns brighter for a moment, without any new wood being added, it is the spirit of Aryan passing through, a final, gentle echo of the boy who became a flame, the demigod who gave everything so that the world would not have to live in the cold. Part 2. The Tale of Leonthy and the Swan. In the heart of Laconia, nestled between stern, grey mountains, lay the city of Sparta. It was a city built of discipline and stone, where every man was a warrior, and every woman was the mother of warriors. In this unyielding world, a woman was born whose spirit was as strong as the bronze of a Spartan shield. Her name was Leonthy. She was the daughter of a commander, and from birth, she was taught the ways of her people. She learned to run, to wrestle, to fight. She was not raised to be beautiful, she was raised to be strong. And she was. By the age of 16, her skill with a spear was a quiet legend among the soldiers. She was disciplined, focused, her heart seemingly forged from the same iron as her blades. Men respected her, a few even feared her, but none saw the secret she kept hidden behind her warrior's gaze. For within Leonthy, there was a quiet, undiscovered country. A place that yearned not for the clash of swords, but for the whisper of the wind through olive groves. A part of her soul that looked up at the stars at night and felt a sense of wonder, not a desire for conquest. This hidden part of her would lead her, on nights of the full moon, away from the rigid order of the barracks. She would slip out of the city, leaving her armor and her reputation behind, and walk into the silent hills. On one such night, drawn by a feeling she could not name, she discovered a hidden grove. It was a place of impossible peace, a small, secret world where ancient trees formed a canopy over a perfectly still, moonlit lake. And there, floating in the center of the lake, was a swan. It was a creature of breathtaking beauty. Its feathers shimmered, not white, but the color of liquid moonlight. It moved without creating a single ripple, its long neck arched in a curve of perfect, silent grace. Leonthy, who had faced down charging boars and enemy soldiers without flinching, found herself holding her breath. She expected it to flee at the sight of her, as any wild creature would. But it did not. It simply turned its head and looked at her. Its eyes were not the simple black beads of a bird, but held a deep, knowing intelligence. It was not an animal looking at a human, it was a presence acknowledging another. Slowly, Leonthy knelt at the water's edge. The swan, with a calm and deliberate grace, glided towards her. It stopped just before her, its warmth a tangible thing in the cool night air. Hesitantly, she reached out her hand, and her fingertips brushed against the impossible softness of its feathers. The touch sent a strange, peaceful warmth through her, a feeling so foreign and so welcome it made her heart ache. The swan dipped its head once, a gesture of quiet understanding, and then glided back to the center of the lake. Leonthi remained there for a long time, the feeling of that touch still lingering on her skin. She did not understand what had happened, but she knew it was the beginning of something that would change her forever. She returned the next full moon, and the swan was there. And the next, and the next. A silent ritual was born between the Spartan warrior and the enchanted bird. She would bring small offerings, a perfect fig, a polished stone, and lay them at the water's edge. The swan never touched them, but it seemed to understand the sentiment. She began to speak to it, her voice soft in the quiet grove. She told it things she had never told another soul. She spoke of the loneliness of being strong, of the quiet sadness that victory in battle never seemed to erase. She spoke of her dreams of a world beyond Sparta, a world of art and music and peace. The swan would listen, its intelligent eyes never leaving her face. Its stillness was a form of communication, a perfect, non-judgmental attention that she had never known. In its presence she felt seen, not as a warrior, not as a commander's daughter, but simply as Leonthi. Over the seasons, a bond formed, woven from moonlight and silence. She would sit at the edge of the lake for hours, sometimes resting her head against the swan's warm, feathered body. In that grove, she was not the fierce warrior of Sparta. She was a woman who had found a kindred spirit in the most unlikely of forms. She did not dare to name the feeling that grew in her heart, but she knew it was the most real and powerful thing she had ever experienced. It was a love born in silence, a connection that defied the rigid, unfeeling world she came from. But the swan held a secret far deeper and more tragic than Leonthi could ever imagine. For this was no ordinary bird. Within that form of feathered grace was imprisoned a god. Apollo. God of light, music, and prophecy. Long ago, in a fit of divine anger, Zeus had punished his son. Apollo's crime had not been rebellion, but compassion. He had spoken out against his father's cruelty towards humankind, and for that, he was cursed. He was stripped of his golden form, his powerful voice silenced, his very essence poured into the body of a swan. He was to remain this way, silent and earthbound, until the end of time, with one cruel condition: if any mortal were ever to discover his true identity and speak his name, the transformation would become permanent and irreversible. He would be turned to stone, a statue for all eternity. And so, for centuries, Apollo lived a life of quiet exile, a prisoner of his own beautiful form. He watched as his temples fell into ruin, and his name faded from the prayers of mortals. He had lost all hope. Until Leonthi. He had not meant for her to see him. But she had stumbled upon his hidden sanctuary, and her presence was like the first ray of sun after a long, dark winter. She was not like the others. She did not try to hunt him or capture him. She did not beg him for favors or fear him as a divine omen. She simply saw him. She spoke to him with a raw, vulnerable honesty that cracked the icy shell of his despair. He could not speak back, could not warn her. He could only listen, and in listening, he began to feel something he thought he had lost forever. He began to love her. It was a tragic, impossible love, for he knew that the very truth of his identity, the one thing he wished he could share with her, was the one thing that would destroy them both. Sparta was a city that did not tolerate secrets. Leonthy's monthly disappearances, her newfound softness, the quiet, distant smile that sometimes graced her lips, these things did not go unnoticed. Whispers followed her through the barracks. Her father, the commander, saw the change in her eyes and questioned her, but her silence was as strong as a fortress wall. She knew she was in danger. In Sparta, anything that could not be understood was a threat. But the pull of the grove, the silent promise of meeting the swan under the full moon, was stronger than her fear. Their love was a secret garden in a world of stone, and she would protect it at any cost. One day, driven by a strange premonition, a dream of a statue of a swan man and a name whispered on the wind, Leonthi wandered farther into the hills than ever before. There, hidden by a waterfall, she found a small, forgotten shrine. On its crumbling altar was a single, faded inscription, almost erased by time, but still legible, to Apollo, the Lightbringer. The truth struck her with the force of a physical blow. The warmth. The intelligence. The dreams. It was him. It had always been him. She stumbled back, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. And as she turned, she saw him. The swan had followed her. It stood there, its head bowed, as if in apology, as if it knew that she had finally found the truth that would seal their fate. Apollo, she whispered, the name a mix of awe and heartbreak on her lips. The moment the name was spoken, the air in the grove grew heavy, charged with a terrible, ancient magic. The curse, which had lain dormant for centuries, was now fulfilled. The swan's form began to shimmer and distort. A pained, silent cry seemed to emanate from it as feathers dissolved into golden light, as wings twisted and reformed into human arms. Where the swan had stood, now knelt a man of impossible beauty, his skin glowing like warm marble, his hair the color of the dawn. It was Apollo, freed from his feathered prison, but only for a moment. He looked at Leonthi, his eyes filled with a universe of love and sorrow. "You were not meant to know," he said, his voice the first and last she would ever hear, a sound like ancient music. Before she could answer, the final part of the curse took hold. The glow in his skin began to fade, replaced by the pale, cold gray of stone. The transformation was swift and merciless. His body, which had just regained its divine form, began to harden, to freeze. He reached a hand out to her, a final, desperate gesture, but his fingers turned to marble before they could touch her cheek. Leonthi could only watch in horror as the god she loved was turned to stone before her very eyes. His form was frozen in a posture of tragic beauty, forever kneeling, forever reaching for her. The light of the world, the god of music and prophecy, was now a silent, unmoving statue. She did not scream. The warrior in her knew that some grief is too deep for sound. She simply knelt before the statue, pressing her forehead against the cold, stone hand, and let her silent tears fall. Leonthi never went back to Sparta. She abandoned her armor, her spear, her name. The world of war and glory no longer had any meaning for her. That hidden grove became her home, the silent statue her only companion. For the rest of her life, she was the sole keeper of Apollo's memory. She grew old in that peaceful grove, her warrior's strength softening into a quiet resilience. And when her time came, she passed away peacefully, resting at the foot of the statue of the god she had loved. The legend says that the grove is still there, hidden from the world. And that if you are lucky enough to find it on a night of the full moon, you might see the statue of Apollo shimmering with a faint, golden light. And sometimes, just for a moment, you might see the ghost of a great white swan, gliding silently across the surface of the still, moonlit lake. Part 3. The Tale of Melanian, the Silent Song. In the verdant hills of Arcadia, a land of shepherds and poets, a boy named Melanian was born. He was not the son of a king or a hero, but his gift was rarer than any crown. From his earliest days, music lived in him. It was in the rhythm of his breath, the melody of his laughter. He needed no teacher. The streams taught him harmony, the wind taught him melody. By the time he was a young man, his skill with the lyre was known throughout the lands. He was a bard whose music could soothe a crying child, mend a broken heart, or make an old warrior weep with the memory of his lost youth. He sang not for fame or gold, but simply because the music needed to be shared. His gift was so pure that it drew the attention of the divine. One evening, as he played by a river, the 9 muses, the very spirits of inspiration, appeared before him. They did not speak, but they sang with him, their voices weaving with his in a harmony that made the very stars seem to lean closer to listen. They had chosen him. They took him to their sacred home on Mount Helicon and taught him the secrets of their art. They taught him how to weave stories into sound, how to capture the sorrow of a tragedy and the joy of a victory in the strings of his lyre. They gave him not just skill, but wisdom. And in return, they asked only that he share this gift with the mortal world, to remind them of the beauty that still existed in their often harsh lives. For a time, Melanian was the perfect vessel. His music brought comfort and joy wherever he went. But a seed of pride began to grow in his heart. He was celebrated, adored. He began to believe the gift was not just flowing through him, but that it belonged to him. He grew obsessed with creating a song greater than any ever heard. A final song, a perfect melody that could capture the essence of creation itself. He withdrew from the world, journeying to a remote cave high in the mountains. There, for months that blurred into years, he worked. The song came to him in fragments, in dreams, in the silence between heartbeats. It was a melody of impossible beauty, a sound that contained the birth of stars and the fall of empires. When it was finally complete, he played it once, and the world held its breath. The winds stilled, the rivers paused, and on Olympus, the gods themselves fell silent, listening in awe. But then, Melanian did something no one expected. He did not share the song. He kept it for himself. He believed it was too perfect, too sacred for the ears of ordinary mortals. He had been given a gift to share, but instead, he chose to hoard it. The muses came to him, their eyes filled with sorrow. They begged him to share the song, to fulfill his purpose. But his pride had hardened his heart. He refused. And so, with a quiet sadness, they left him. The gods, who tolerate many flaws in mortals, do not tolerate the theft of divine beauty. They decided to teach Melanian a lesson, not of wrath, but of perfect, poetic irony. The curse was a simple one. They did not take the song from him. Instead, they ensured that he would be the only one to ever hear it, but only in his dreams. Every night, as Melanian slept, the perfect song would return to him, filling his dream world with its transcendent beauty. He would weep with joy, his soul soaring on the wings of his own creation. But every morning, upon waking, the memory of it would vanish like mist. He would be left with only the aching, hollow knowledge that he had possessed something perfect, and had lost it once more. His life became a torment. The days were a frantic, desperate scramble to remember even a single note. The nights were a beautiful, agonizing reminder of what he could no longer hold. He stopped playing his lyre, his other beautiful songs now feeling like pale, worthless imitations. He became a ghost, haunted by the memory of a sound. He wandered the lands, a gaunt, wild-eyed figure, asking strangers if they had heard a perfect song in their dreams. People who had once showered him with praise now fled from him in fear and pity. The muses watched from afar, their hearts heavy with sorrow. He had been their greatest student, and now he was their greatest tragedy. His punishment was not that he had forgotten the song, but that he was forced to remember it every single night, only to lose it again and again. He had caged beauty, and in doing so, had created his own perfect, eternal prison. Years turned to decades. Melanian grew old and frail, his life worn away by the endless cycle of dream and loss. One final evening, he lay down on a cliff overlooking the sea, his body tired, his spirit broken. He closed his eyes, and for the last time, the song came to him. It filled his dream, as beautiful as ever. But this time, he did not cling to it. He did not mourn its inevitable departure. He simply listened, and in that act of pure, selfless listening, he finally understood. The song was never his to own. It was a part of the world, a current in the great river of creation. He had only ever been a witness to it. With that final, peaceful thought, he let go. The shepherds who found him the next morning said he looked at peace, a faint smile on his lips. There was no music, no sound. But the waves on the shore below seemed to move with a strange, gentle rhythm. The final song was never heard by mortal ears. It was never written down. But the legend says that it did not disappear. It dissolved back into the world, into the quiet moments of beauty that mortals often overlook. It is said to be in the sound of the wind through an old olive tree, in the silence just after a snowfall, and the first notes of a song a musician plays when they are alone, with no one watching. It is a melody you cannot seek, but only feel. A quiet reminder of the bard who created something perfect, and learned too late that the greatest beauty is not in possessing it, but in letting it go.